Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you, Secretary Buttigieg. And
Same here.
we're very glad that you're here. As a former mayor and a former board member of a transit agency, I know how critical it is that transit systems can survive the pandemic, but also expand service. And this is a conversation about equity as well. So I'm gonna ask you two questions, one about TOD and then another one about one of my favorite topics, high-speed rail. So as we look to infrastructure, transit expansion with a focus on housing feasibility, because for so long we have not linked housing with expansion of transportation. We know it's good for an economic recovery and also employing thousands of union workers. So for example, in my hometown of Tacoma, when we expand light rail, it will affect 57% of the population that is minority and 22% low income. But because of the pandemic and economic factors, there's a potential for project delay. Last Congress, this committee included, the House passed a provision to increase funding of total project costs to eligible capital investment grant or CIG projects. So can you tell us, Mr. Secretary, how the Department of Transportation will work to support similar programs and streamline the CIG program to prevent unnecessary delays while also working with your HUD counterpart, another mayor, Secretary Fudge, on TOD?
Well, thank you for representing the Mayor's Club here and for a really important question. You know, I think mayors are compelled to consider all of the integration between different policy areas, and the structure of the federal government doesn't always reflect that. As mayor, you don't get to think about transit one week and housing the next. They're all on your plate, all at the same time and all side by side. And I think increasingly we can break across those silos federally to do so. Matter of fact, I reached out to Secretary Fudge right away when she was confirmed, and we've already had great conversations about this. There's no road without a context. It goes from somewhere to somewhere, and the same is true for every transit route. And we need to make sure that we're synchronizing what we're doing around housing and community development with what we seek to do around transit and transportation. As you mentioned, one of the powerful tools we have for that is that capital investment grant program. And there have been steps from the prior administration that changed how some of the relevant calculations were conducted in a way that that created more obstacles. And we're taking a look at that and what we can do to make sure that this resource really is there in all the ways it should be for our communities. So you have my commitment that we'll not only make sure this tool is as effective as possible, but that we'll continue to integrate not only at my level with my counterparts in the cabinet, but inviting my staff to do the same thing, because we have, as every mayor does, we have to be integrating these considerations to have truly functional neighborhoods and transit systems in the future.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Secretary. And then a very quick question about high-speed rail. You know, we're talking about high-speed rail projects in different parts of the country. We're talking about Texas. We talked about the Northeast. We've even talked about California. And I want to make sure that you're aware that in the Pacific Northwest, there is the Cascadia Innovation Corridor, and we're considering what we're calling ultra high-speed rail. But with that, we know that sometimes there are cities that are smaller that are left out of the transit hubs when we talk about high-speed rail. So are you able to talk about any sort of a commitment you're willing to make that when we talk about high-speed rail investments, that we're doing it equitably, geographic equity, and also, of course, the equity that we talk about having an inclusive workforce?
Thank you. Yes, on the first front, we need to make sure that no community is left out of these incredible capabilities. And that's got to be a very important part of system design and policy design, so that not just those communities that have the direct stops, but those around them are positioned to benefit. And that's part of what it means to have an integrated network, so people can get to where they need to be. On the latter point, I think that's no less important, making sure economically that the people who have been excluded and, let's face it, sometimes directly made worse off by past infrastructure investments are being included and are benefiting, whether it's as workers on these projects, as owners of businesses doing business with federal government or federally funded state and local projects, and of course as community residents benefiting from these investments. We haven't always got it right as the country, but this is our chance to do it right this time.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for your vision. And I'm thrilled to have a mayor at the helm of transportation. Mr. Chair, I yield back.